All right, I know we got Andrew out there. I know we have a few more too. Wouldn't mind if you went on to the chat and said hello so I know what I'm dealing with. Get started in just literally 2 minutes here. Yeah, so Andrew, that guitar is skinned, obviously, but I chose the image. I found it online. I wish I could credit the artist, but where I found it didn't credit the artist. It's an incredible piece, and it's accurate, which is one of the things that's like amazing to me. Elsa Lanchester as the bride has red hair, which she should, but almost everyone draws and paints her with black hair with the white or silver streaks in it. So that's important to me. Can everyone hear me out there? Is the sound okay? The little dots at the bottom are saying that it's good, but you guys are more important than this crappy program. I watched your Throw Me Thursday episode. I was wondering how you were going to get away with all the nudity. Maybe I just don't understand YouTube's parameters yet. But I encourage it, by the way. But I encourage it. Ray, you're going to be happy, I think, this video. I think you're going to be very happy. And I love the fact that you are giving the lyrics to the original version of the song, not the version everyone knows from Return of the Living Dead, which is the shirt I'm wearing. I actually prefer the middle cut, which you can find on as a B, just basically as a B-side. It sounds more like the metal version from the Return of the Living Dead soundtrack, which Paul B. Cutler retooled, but it still has the original lyrics, which I actually really do prefer. But you know what? When you come to 45 Grave, I mean real 45 Grave with Paul B. Cutler and Paul Bolas and Dinah Cancer and Mary Sims, you can't go wrong. Yeah, Andrew. So I've only gotten one copyright claim so far, and it was for the light bulb sound from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was the only thing in the video that when I originally uploaded the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre autopsy, that was not my original creation. It was the only thing I used. It was a sample. Laws on samples are very clean cut. There's no way that was a legitimate claim of a copyright. I mean, the entire industrial genre could not exist if sampling technology in the law didn't sit where it does. I mean, you have 7 seconds to use in a different way. Now, you can't just loop something and like use, a bass line or something, although hip hop artists used to do it all the time before they started licensing it. Or if you're a Puff Daddy, you just, get Jimmy Page to replay the guitar line because you don't want to pay the fee. Yeah, so yeah, the TCM soundtrack, it's also a matter of no one thought that was ever going to be reused for anything. So there was no storing it. I mean, it's musique concrète. It's mostly noise, and I mean that in the best possible way. The same way the Blair Witch soundtrack is mostly noise, and that works for the film. I'd rather see noise soundtracks in a lot of cases than these lame like generic orchestra hits and fake strings that we were getting all the time in the Blumhouse productions, for instance. I really think there's power in noise. And if you've seen the introduction to any of my videos, you know that I make noise. Won't call it music, so. All right, let's get properly started here. What I wanted to discuss today was the connection, the umbilicus between rock and roll and horror, because to me, they're very, very, very conjoined. If you've ever seen my bio, which appears at the top of my Twitter, it's published as the About the Author in all my books. It's everywhere, basically, that I am. It says that I grew up on yellow-spined paperbacks, black and white monster movies, and the Thunder Lizard backbeat of rock and roll. And that is me. I mean, that's kind of all there is. I wish I was a deeper person. I wish I could tell you that I had interest in professional chess championships or that I could follow sports or whatever. I don't have those interests. Those three things, great, trashy fiction, old horror movies and new horror movies, of course, but but my sweet spot will always be the older horror films and rock and roll. And I grew up pretty much with the wave of American punk rock, and punk rock was not what we think of it today as. Punk rock was everything from Blondie through Minor Threat growing up. It was a big, wide view of music, and it was not just one sound. Today, when you buy a punk record, you're basically talking about a 3-chord punk record with, a lot of repetition. And there was that on the marketplace. You had the circle jerks, but you also had bands like, Death of Samantha, who we'll actually get to today, and which was basically really dirty, drunk pub rock. And I think the genre of punk rock was healthier then. And I think the same things happened to horror. Not to jump ahead, but it's kind of the same thing. Is it's become codified into being one thing in most people's heads, and it's hurting the genre, because horror used to be Jaws and The Exorcist and A Ghost Story and The Changeling. They were all in the same genre, which is kind of mind-blowing, actually, because if you look at other genres, they don't vary as much as the horror genre does. Same thing with punk rock, I felt. And then by the mid-late 80s, I had discovered industrial rock coming out of Germany and the beginning of the Chicago sound, the Wax Trax years. And I fell in love with that, because that was something that was even going further astray. To me, I almost wish we didn't have the term industrial. I like it and I use it a lot, but I almost feel it's an extension of punk, honestly. It's that whole, what can we do that hasn't been done before? How can we keep things real? How can we keep things very, very street? Early hip hop was that way too. It took me much longer than it should have to discover it. It took a live performance by Ice-T at Lollapalooza for me to embrace hip hop. But once I did, I discovered that in those early years, it was much the same thing. It was street level music. It was one of the most pure forms of rock and roll for a while there, when Public Enemy and Ice-T and NWA and the Ghetto Boys were performing. Eventually, obviously, it would become formulaic even inside that sound and get boring for me. And what it is now, I won't even touch, because it's basically just pop music, which I like some pop music too, but my heart's always going to be kind of with the off-kilter stuff. And before someone asks, I do like some metal, but I'm really picky with metal, and I don't think metal always ages very well. Whereas I think a lot of the great, more rooty rock and roll or punk rock does really actually age well. So anyway, what I wanted to do is go through some records that I think are really relevant to both rock and roll, obviously, and also to the horror genre. And this isn't one, I didn't want to just pull out a bunch of soundtracks, though. That's not what this is. There are a few soundtracks we're going to go over that I think are particularly important to this discussion, but in general, we're going to talk about bands and how they kind of either directly or indirectly kind of speak to the genre. Because I think there are a lot of them, and I think they're really, 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 really important for the horror fan who perhaps, if it's just movies all the time, if you're not someone who's reading and you're not checking out comic books or playing the video games, I think music is the sanest place to go for your horror fix. I don't play video games, and I don't really read comic books much. And as a result, it's pretty much at this point books and music and movie, as my bio suggests. So I'm going to start off with probably the most obscure thing that we're going to cover today, but I really, really want to impress this title on people. If you come out of this whole show with nothing else, it's that you need to check out this band and this release. It's a New Zealand band called Superette, and the album is Tiger. I own it on CD. When it was issued in the 90s, it was just CD out of New Zealand. I bought it as an import. I didn't know it was an import. It was fairly cheap. I picked it up at the Princeton Record Exchange, which sells a lot of used records as well as a lot of promotional records that they weren't supposed to be selling. But it's Superette was a blind purchase. I knew nothing about the band whatsoever, but at that time it was a very great time in music. All these alternative bands were coming out with new sounds that we'd never heard before. You didn't know what you're getting popping it in, but you knew you're going to get something that didn't sound like Boston or Journey. You knew it was going to be innovative and new, and even if it was a disaster and you ended up selling it back the next week, it was worth taking the gamble, because music was worth it. I was part of music culture at that time. I was just connected. So I never regretted even a bad purchase in music. But this album has never left my rotation. It's always within arm's length of whatever I'm playing music on. It spent lots of times in cars. This CD spent lots of times in the home stereo. And now in the DVD player, the DVD ROM drive that I have attached to this computer. It's just an album that's amazing. And what's amazing about this album, what I can't speak enough about, is it's an alternative rock album. Sounds kind of like a more garagey Smashing Pumpkins. A little bit of shoegazer in there, but not that much. You can clearly imagine hearing these guys play on a stage, and not be like watching paint dry. It's a very moody album, but here's the thing: every song on this album is a song from the point of view of a real life murderer. In most of the cases, a serial killer. And it's from their point of view and their sympathetic viewpoints on all of it. The album has this sadness to it and this kind of genuine insanity to it that I can't really describe. You have to hear it. It starts with a song called Kiss Someone, which is like this rallying call for the outsider, the ultimate outsiders. And that's ultimately what it's doing. It's just kind of relating all these criminals to being the ultimate outsiders. And I think it's making these horrific people really relatable. I think it's a crazy great record. You have songs about Mark David Chapman. You have songs about Ed Gein. You have songs about John Wayne Gacy. That's a song called Killer Clown, which you can find easily on YouTube. I got to give massive credit. When Flying Nun put this out, they had to have known that it was going to get lost in the shuffle, but it was just too good not to release. I don't think it came out as a cash-in grab on the alternative scene. I think legitimately they saw this as an important record. So this is a heavy recommendation for me. It is available again. Flying Nun reissued it on vinyl, CD, and as a MP3 collection. And all of them are expanded from this original edition. But if you look at the vinyl, it actually has one additional track to everything else. So I still need to pick that up. But this is one of my absolute favorite albums of all time. And I didn't leave myself anywhere to put this. All right. Next up, we have Frontline Assembly's Hardwired. Now, maybe technically this is more cyberpunk than it is horror, but it is a horrifying record. This is a concept album about technology taking over humanity directly, medically, circuitry under the skin, which is a theme that was in a lot of industrial music, obviously, but in this album is the perfect blending. It is so dense with sounds, all of them upsetting. The vocals are perfect. The guitars are used at a perfect balance, which was something this band always struggled with when they used guitars. Sometimes it was too much, and like on the album Millennium, and sometimes it wasn't enough, like Tactical Neural Implant, where you can be excused by thinking there isn't any guitars on the record, but there is. Right, there is a reissue. Don't buy that original at that $75 price point. And you can literally get the album as a download for like $8 or something. Next, on the other hand, I know this is about rock and roll. However, Aaron J. Kernis' Second Symphony is a classical piece that every horror fan needs to own. This was written for a British documentary about the burning of the oil fields in Iraq after the end of the first Gulf War. And Aaron J. Kernis just brilliantly knocked it out of the park. This is the most violent piece of music ever written. You listen to this, you feel like someone is beating the hell out of you. And it's classical, don't get me wrong. It's going to remind some people of Penderecki. It actually reminds me of Harry Manfredini's score. I actually approached Manfredini about this. He wasn't familiar with the piece, but I asked him to check it out because it has that kind of moments of absolute pure madness in it. And it starts so strong. If you like Carmina Burana, which everyone who likes horror likes Carmina Burana by Karl Orff, you're going to love this as well. So Aaron J. Kernis' Second Symphony. This CD is out of print, but there is a CD imprint, and again, you can find it easily enough. The piece is on YouTube, and definitely worth a listen in the background while you do things around the house. And yep, I will make a list of all these albums available in the comments to the video eventually. You got to give me a little bit of time to do that, but I will. So just check back with this video, maybe watch at least 30 seconds of it, hint, hint, and get all your album titles that you're interested in at that point. Going to vinyl, Blue Oyster Cult Imaginos. This is my favorite Blue Oyster Cult album. This is my favorite a lot of things, actually. When we talk about the hair metal era, this is a weird entry in it because it is and is not. Now, most people know Blue Oyster Cult from Don't Fear the Reaper, which I wouldn't call a metal track by any means, but as the years went by, they tried to remain relevant, and as a rock band, they got harder. This is actually an album that kind of blends all their sounds, which is kind of brilliant, but that's not what's cool about it from a horror perspective. In my opinion, outside of the writings of H.P. Lovecraft, this album is the thing that captures the feel and scope of Lovecraft and cosmic horror better than anything else. The liner notes call it a random access myth. And all that means is you can start or stop the story that's being told in the album at any point. It's not a conventional narrative. But what everyone can agree on, because there's a lot of differences of opinion about this album, is that it tells the story of a sea captain who steals an ancient mirror that is a portal through time, space, and other dimensions from the jungle. And he means to give it as a gift to his granddaughter. And it's kind of about his adventures through navigating through the world. And there's strong oppositional forces that are much larger than him at work. And this album is great. It actually manages to kind of explain the name of the band during its runtime. If you don't have this album, you need to get it. It almost broke up the band. Most of the band did not want anything to do with this record. And, it's one of those albums, much like, Beach Boys' Pet Sounds or the Beatles' White Album, where everything, despite the turmoil in the band, came together to produce something just absolutely brilliant. Blue Oyster Cult Imaginos. I couldn't pick a more different record to follow this with, but okay, so Wednesday week. So if the album What We Had is their best known album, and it's hilarious. I'm showing you these photos. You're probably thinking this looks like the least horror thing ever. Well, do you know a film called Slumber Party Massacre Part 2? When the girls are playing in the garage? That is a recreation of Wednesday week's one of his albums called Praying Mantis. And I love this as a great straightforward, like Go-Go's, early Pretenders rock band from the early 80s. And if you like the songs in the movie, this is a... All right, we're going to try something